It's time for the chip race.
For strategy this week, we are joined by a man who has spent his career living by the strict code of get it quietly, so much so that he has resisted umpteen previous invitations to come on this show, a genuine triple threat in cash games, tournaments and online. He is the 2012 European Masters of Poker champion and just a short time ago became the Unibet Open online champion, for which he won €80,000. After that touch, both Dara and I twisted his arm. So here he is, one of our great friends, better known as Smidge, the one and only Padraig O'Neill. Padraig, welcome.
Thanks for having me, guys. Delighted to be on.
Well, look, to the hand, 8 left on the final table. You are 2 of 8. The chip leader has 120 big blinds. You have 75 big blinds. Third has 47 bigs, and everyone else is between 12 and 35 bigs. We mentioned this on commentary, actually at the exact point where this hand begins. But Dara, can you explain the general ICM predicament in which Padraig finds himself?
Yeah, I mean, the ICM is pretty terrible. Padraig had a good seat in the sense that he was to the immediate left of the chip leader, so he knew whether the chip leader was involved or not before he got in, and if the chip leader folded, he had shorter stacks behind that he could put ICM pressure on. But his ICM against the chip leader is by far the biggest ICM of any player at the table against another player. So he has to be super careful choosing which hands to get involved with and how to play them. So it's kind of a nightmare scenario for him. It's one of those spots where when the chip leader opens, if you haven't looked at your cards yet, you're kind of hoping you can look down at a hand that you can just happily fold. You obviously can't fold all of your hands because you have to keep playing, but it's a very tricky situation playing against the chip leader. And this particular chip leader was very aggressive using big sizings, which just exacerbates the ICM.
Well, that brings us nicely to the hand itself. At blinds 816k, the chip leader min opens the cutoff to 32k. Padraig doesn't look down at one of those easy decisions where he can fold, and he 3-bets 2 black aces on the button to 96k, exactly triple the open. Blinds fold and the villain calls. Padraig, obviously you have aces here. It's obviously a 3-betting hand. I think Dara is absolutely right that had you look down at probably even some pretty attractive looking hands like your ace jacks, your ace 10 suited, your king queens, you're not loving the idea of getting in here, although at least you would have position. How would you construct your range in a spot like that? Are you carving off an awful lot of your normal range?
Yes, absolutely. With ICM, you have to compare to chip EV. I'm going to flat call a lot more of my hands. I'm not exactly sure what my range will be for 3-bet, and it's easy to say now, but we weren't on the final table too long at this point. Although we know now he used big sizings and he was aggressive. Up to that point, all I knew about him was he 3-bet a few hands and actually played them reasonably passive. So I wasn't that worried that my 75 big blinds would be at risk that often. So maybe I'm going to 3-bet like 7-8% of hands max. It's going to be lower than normal for sure, because he does have me covered and I'm in a very good position at the moment.
Yeah, that's a really nice breakdown. Well, the pot is 232k and the flop comes the jack of spades, jack of clubs, 3 of clubs. Action goes check, check. Now, Dara, obviously in a lot of worlds, people will check to the aggressor. I believe some solver output might suggest our villain could have a leading range here in this spot. But Padraig's decision to check back here, is that a smart decision from a pot control line point of view? Obviously, that's the kind of board where Padraig's either very far ahead or he actually has been overtaken by a jack.
Yeah, I think it is a smart decision. The sort of feature of ICM in these spots, these very high ICM spots, is that we end up playing a lot more passively. We spoke to Bertie Bailey actually recently about this, and after the interview we were talking about ICM, and he said that in these spots, the chip leader is effectively betting their stack rather than their hand or their range. And we can get raised a lot if we bet. Actually, it's quite interesting. I did run a sim on this with the ICM, and the solver advocated the chip leader actually just betting the flop 100% of the time. So essentially donk leading into the pre-flop aggressor, which again is something you see a lot in these spots where the ICM pressure is huge on another player. The other thing about the board specifically is the jack high board does actually favor the defender in this case. He has probably a lot more jack X in his range because he will peel ace jack suited, king jack suited, queen jack suited, all those types of hands to the 3-bet. Smidge probably isn't 3-betting too many hands with a jack in it. So already we're in a difficult spot on this board.
Absolutely. Smidge, what are your thoughts when you see a board like that? Is it pretty consistent with how Dara's broke it down there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think without ICM, I'd be betting 25% an awful lot here. But with ICM, I think I need to check back over 3/4 of the time, maybe all the time. I'm not sure. But with aces, I do prefer checking.
Yeah, and on commentary, I think we can back that up. We immediately said, well, this isn't the kind of board Smidge can see bet here. So everyone in agreement. To the turn, it comes the 6 of spades. So the board now reads Jack of spades, Jack of clubs, 3 of clubs, 6 of spades. 2 flush draws out there. That's kind of crucial, I think, and very relevant in this spot. Villain leads into us 1.3x pot, so a really, really big bet. Obviously, when you check back the flop here, Padraig, you're pretty much happy to snap off normal size turn and river bets on most runouts, or at least I'm assuming that's the case. This bet kind of puts the cat among the pigeons to some extent, because calling now means it's just a pop bet to get you all in by the river. You tanked for a long time. Did you consider folding to this bet?
Not at that point, but I did think if I blocked both flush draws, I'd probably consider folding. It's a very big bet and he's diverging here a lot. I don't think it's a massive overbet spot, but I could be wrong.
You're actually spot on. Again, ran this through the solver. The solver does advocate him betting a lot after the flop goes check, check, but it never uses the big sizing. It uses a smaller sizing. Often in these spots, you'll see the first bet that goes into the pot is quite a small one. And if there's a big bet coming, it's on the next street.
That's really interesting. Are there any merits, though, Dara, to this sort of max pressure line? I'm thinking back to a hand with Neil Farrell where he sort of said, well, when you have a spot where your villain will call 1 bet but not 2, you want to kind of put a decent sized first bet in and then, you know, still have enough to get him off it by the river. In a weird kind of way, he's sized this so that he's gone very big on the turn and he actually doesn't have to go quite as big on the river.
I mean, there are some merits, but it's kind of an inconsistent way to play your range because if you have a jack, you don't really want the guy to fold. And on the other hand, you know, we said Smidge has less jacks, but there's nothing to stop Smidge from having a jack in this spot as well. So you can be just betting into a big hand. Smidge will hold all of his strong hands back on the flop anyway and check them behind. So we don't really know anything yet about Smidge's hand. So he's betting into a range he doesn't really know too much about. Other than that, it's very strong pre-flop. So it has certainly merits in the sense of, yeah, we can maybe bet big and then get a fold on the river, but it's still very non-standard.
Well, to the river. The pot is 832k. You have roughly 804k. It comes the 8 of diamonds, and he puts you all in. Now, Padraig, you've obviously got the wrong aces here. The red aces unblock his likely flush draws. If you fold here, you're still second in chips. How much of a consideration was that?
I think that was the main reason I did fold. I would hazard a guess that the solver is going to say, yeah, you should call. But yeah, it was ICM. I thought there was going to be mistakes on this final table. I didn't want to call off on a guess. I thought it was close, but I didn't think I could call off. Again, I hadn't seen him do anything. Going back now, I wouldn't be happy about it, but given what I know now, I would have to call.
Yeah, as the final table progressed, this player did play fairly wily. He built an enormous chip lead where I think at one point he had over 3x anybody else and still ended up coming fourth. So sort of lived by the sword, died by the sword. I'm interested by, and I think it's a hugely important point in all of this. Dara, maybe you can speak to it as well. Smidge just said there he didn't want to go out on a guess. Sometimes in these incredibly difficult polarized situations, you are sort of left in a kind of he either has it or he doesn't situation. And as Smidge said, this is a relatively soft 1K. In fact, it might be the softest 1K anyone's likely to see online this year. So the opportunity to carve out little edges against all the other players over a 2, 3, 4 hour final table would all be lost in the situation where you just make your stand here.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One thing I always try and get across to my students when I'm coaching is don't just look at the solver and say, okay, well, solver says call, so therefore it's a call. You have to consider other factors. Exactly how profitable is the call? And if it's not that profitable, is it wise to take such a big spot for a fairly small profit? Now, based on the ranges I put in to the solver does call, but it doesn't think the call is making very much at all. So it's one of those spots where, yeah, if you're going to play purely by the solver, you call. But you have to take all the other factors into consideration. As you said, it's a very soft 1K. In my opinion, at least, Padraig had a fairly significant skill edge over the field that was left at that point. If he folds, he remains second in chips. And he still has the best seat. He's to the immediate left of the chip leader. He's going to have a lot of clearer spots, hopefully, down the line, where he doesn't have to decide for all of his things. If he makes this call and he's wrong, he's out of the tournament in 8th. If he folds, okay, he's lost a significant amount of chips, and he has a hand which is, from a purely solver point of view, strong enough to call. But at least he's still in second place, and the structure is so good. If this was a hyper turbo, I think, again, it's a different situation. You maybe shouldn't be passing spots like this, but on a well-structured, relatively soft final table, I actually prefer the fold here.
No, that's a great point. Padraig, I know you asked an awful lot of your friends who are professional poker players, their opinions on this one. I know you also did some solves of your own. What were the most interesting things you learned?
I guess it was to get my range pre-flop a little bit better, to add in a couple of Jack X 3-bets, just to have 25% of a number of different hands, and to not play too tight against good opponents, because they're just going to be able to put this pressure on when you're unbalanced. Another thing, a good few of them actually said they'd fold turn. They said they'd see this bet and just don't think someone's going to bluff this amount or give up with this amount now. There was a mixed view on that. More said they would call once and see, because a lot of people wouldn't be capable of bluffing here on the final table. It is easier for him. He's still in. He still has like 30, 40 bigs if he's wrong and I do call. But some people just aren't incapable of doing that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because on commentary in real time, Dara and I, and Ian was there as well, giving his 2 cents. I sort of said to Dara, well, what's interesting about this is even if Padraig is light in Jack X hands, he obviously does appear to be almost face up as aces or kings. That was our read of the situation, which I guess it turned out to be correct. In that spot, your villain has to be confident he can get you to fold aces or kings, which obviously is not the kind of thing a lot of players will do.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Given the stage, I think it's a bit easier to get someone to fold it. On a normal final table with, say, 5,000 for the winner, and you're there with 8 left, I think it's a lot easier for a lot of people to press call.
Well, I want to say a huge thank you to you for not getting this one too quietly. You ended up winning 80 grand, of course. Fantastic result. I hope there's a trophy in the post for you. Padraig O'Neill, it has been absolutely fantastic to have you on the show.
Thanks, David and Dara.
Thanks, Midge.